I first came across Teilhard de Chardin many years ago. I was doing an education paper at university, and it was dealing with education and society. And Jack Shellcrace, who was a lecturer, said that as far as he was concerned, there were three seminal thinkers of the 20th century. One was Teilhard de Chardin, one was Carl Jung, and one was Marshall McLuhan. So I hadn't heard of Teilhard de Chardin at that stage, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And years later, when I was doing the postgraduate yoga course, we had to do a research paper. And one of the tutors said to me, why don't you investigate Teilhard de Chardin? So I thought, okay, I will. And the more I found out about him, the more I became interested in him. So this is very much an introduction. We could spend days and days and days and weeks talking about him. So please forgive me for the bits that I skim, the bits that I miss out, because I'm just aware that I've got to fit this into a space of time. So just bear with me. He lived from 1881 to 1955. And cross your fingers for the technology. Who was he? He was a French Jesuit priest. He was a geologist and he was a paleontologist. And as far as he was concerned, God was to be found in matter as well as, well, the spirit. The spirit was in matter as well. He became very interested in the theories of evolution, which didn't go over very well with the church. Because as far as the church was concerned, God created Adam and Eve. There was original sin. The world was created in 7 days. And Teilhard, as a scientist, is saying, hold on a minute, we have to have a wider perspective. And he made many enemies within the Jesuit order, many enemies within the church. He also had some very, very good friends within the church who basically saved him. But as he said towards the end of his life, he went to a reception in Rome, and he said to one of his friends there was a Dominican brother there, and he said, that man would burn me if he could. So, and he likened himself to Galileo. Now, I've made a list of some of his main books there, which are way too many for people to memorize or remember. A lot of them are in the library here, aren't they, Sylvia?
I put some of them.
Okay. The Phenomenon of Man, Hymn of the Universe, The Divine Milieu. Those are some of them. One that I'm particularly fond of is The Making of a Mind, Letters from a Soldier Priest, which he wrote to his cousin in Paris. And we'll come to why he was a soldier priest in a minute. He lived in a time of huge change. If you think of the changes in society between 1881 and 1955, they were huge. Probably surpassed now by the changes we've lived through, but for him, huge. There were 2 world wars. And what world wars tended to do was change the whole perspective of the world on technology, on society. Previous structures couldn't exist anymore. There had to be new structures. And it was a time of great suffering and questioning, and a time of much questioning of authority. And he was right in the middle of that. What I've done is I've put the main places that he lived in, and I'll come back to those as well. So he was born outside Clermont-Ferrand, which is part of the Auvergne in France. It's an agricultural region. It's a region that has huge geological structures, much interest in terms of fossils, etc. He went to Paris to do some of his Jesuit study. And at that stage, the French government was very secular, and they forbade the Jesuit order from teaching in France. So he then went to Hastings in England to do part of his novitiate. And there he also became absolutely fascinated with the fossils that were found around Hastings, because it's an area that's hugely rich in fossils. And so it was opening up his perspective. As a child, his father had taken him walks through the countryside. His father was very interested in rocks, stones, nature, birds, trees, and had taken him for many walks and talked about those things with him. His mother was a devoutly religious, pious woman, so he got a lot of his Christianity from his mother. So he combined the two things, the scientific interest and the absolute piety, the devotion to God. The issue that became for Teilhard was his concept of God was much, much wider than this big man in the sky who imposed Catholic dogma. And much of it couldn't be coped with by the church. He, as part of his novitiate, they were sent out to other areas, other countries to teach, and he was sent to Cairo, where he taught in a school there. So it was his introduction to Islam, and he was fascinated with Islam and fascinated with the teachings and the people who practiced Islam. So again, his worldview was becoming wider. When it came to France in World War I, he was called out. He lost 3 brothers in the war. He could have become an officer because of his stage in the church, and he said no, he would be a stretcher bearer. So he was a stretcher bearer through some of the worst battles of World War I. And he served, he comforted, he was kind. What he brought to those injured men and the men around him was absolutely compassion, a concept of divinity, kindness. He survived the war. As his mother said, she thought God had other plans for him. So when he went back to his novitiate in his studies in geology, paleontology, etc., he got more and more of a thorn in the side of the order in the church. So they sent him off to China. Supposedly to do geological studies, but I mean, France to China, you got the pest out of your way. But for him, again, it opened up a whole new world, whole new perspective. He spent amazing time archaeologically exploring fossils, studying the geological strata of the earth of China. And for him, China was always a very special place. And as long as the church could keep him out of the way, they still refused to publish anything of his. Anything he wrote, no publish. So as I've said, studies in theology and philosophy. He became an ordinated Jesuit priest. He stretch bearer, scientific exploration. Returning to France, I thought I'd corrected that 0 at the end of that. Anyhow, on return to France, he was refused to publish his work on the divine milieu, which had come from his experiences in China and how he saw the earth as a manifestation of God. So at the same time as God was manifesting in the earth was manifesting God, which again didn't go over very well with the orthodox teachings of the church at all. So again, in the Second World War, they popped him off to China. And of course, by that stage, the Japanese had come into Beijing, so he couldn't get out of China. He was under house arrest in China for the whole of the Second World War. But again, he went on expeditions, he explored, he went into Mongolia, and he was part of a group of expatriate British, American, French, some others that escape me at the moment. And so they formed a very supportive, close community there. He came back to Paris in 1945. He was given permission by his order, but they refused to publish any of his writings. So by 1951, he'd had a serious heart attack. He knew he wasn't well. And he had this issue in that as a priest, he'd taken orders of obedience, poverty, and chastity. And under his vow of obedience, his works all belonged to the order. And he took his role as a priest very, very seriously. At no time, in spite of what the order was doing to him, in spite of what the church was doing to him, did he refuse his priesthood. He was told to. One friend told him that basically divorce the order, you're badly matched. He said no, he regarded his vows as a priest as absolutely sacred. Didn't matter what the order did to him, didn't matter what the church did to him. What was sacred was his vows as a priest. So following his vows as a priest, he should have followed the vow of obedience and given his writings to the order. But he knew that if he did, they'd probably be destroyed. They would never, ever come to view. We would never see them today. So with a pretty heavy heart, he bequeathed all of his writings to his secretary, a woman called Jeanne Mortier. And she was secular, she wasn't part of the church. So she kept them safe. And it's from those documents that she kept safe that we have the books that are published today, because they're all published after his death, because the church had tried to squash him. He died in 1955 in New York. He'd had a second heart attack. Now, I just want to come to his writings. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. So, something to meditate on. These are the mountains around the Auvergne where he was born and raised. And they're volcanic, huge geological interest. And that's the town of Clermont-Ferrand, was the provincial capital. And his family owned a townhouse near this street. And across the street from where the townhouse was, the statue entitled Spirit and Matter offers a memorial to Teilhard as Jacob wrestling with the angel. So he was acknowledged. He was recognized by the scientific community in France. He was offered all sorts of academic positions, chairs of geology, whatever, and again the church would not give him permission. And of course he had vowed obedience. So that's the cathedral where he would have worshipped, and that's the interior, and the black basalt rock of the church there. That's the house that he grew up in, Sassone. And apparently it's still there. And that leads from the main road, and it's the Rue de Teilhard de Chardin. And that's where he was baptized, July 21st, 1881. Those religious artifacts he would have seen, they would have been part of his childhood, part of his church experience. The carvings, the original sin of Adam and Eve, the original sin, which of course then he started questioning. That's the highest volcanic peak. It's interesting because from here we used mountains. What's the volcanic peak? Doesn't look that huge to us, but that's simply because we're used to a different landscape. And that's where he used to walk with his father. That's Teilhard at the age of 12. As a Jesuit novice. That's the school in Cairo where he taught. He taught Muslim students physics and philosophy. That's his first exposure to the East into Islam. That's his faculty in Cairo. He's standing seventh from the left, which he probably will not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's from the right, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There he is, there. His students, his philosophy students. The cliffs of Hastings, full of fossils, limestone full of fossils. And that's his fossil collection, which is still in the Hastings Museum. And he spent a lot of his scientific life at the Paris Museum of Natural History, studied there. I think he did his doctorate there as well. He was part of the team that discovered Peking Man. There was 67 battles, stretcher bearer, without suffering a wound. Same time lost 2 of his brothers. 2 of his brothers, he had another brother die, a sister die. So out of the 11 children, there weren't that many left. And still, there's a World War I pillbox looking over the hills of Verdun, the battlefields. There's a picture of him. Right, it's very hard to see, he's half out of it. For the first time, he was living with a huge range of people in very rough conditions. So again, his worldview from his close family, from his Jesuit novitiate, suddenly his worldview had to expand again and had to encompass a much wider range of humanity. And that's the Verdun Cemetery, Muslim and Christian graves all together. When you look at all of those lives that just in the mud for nothing. Stained glass window there depicting the litter bearers, which is what Teilhard did. It's the care, carrying the wounded. Because somebody was wounded in a situation like that, the mud, the dreadful conditions, the dampness, they would have been suffering hugely. There he is. He was in World War I for 4.5 years. Stretcher bearer in a North African Muslim regiment. He said, what emerged into my field of perception was literally a new universe. And he spent a lot of his time when he could writing. There's a plaque honouring him and a memorial there. And this is Teilhard in China, looking at rocks for fossils. The expedition went to the Ordos Desert, where it's out from, should have put a map, out from Beijing and out from another place down there. I'm showing you a map of China, you understand. And the Ordos Desert was in towards Mongolia. And he composed his famous Mass on the World, and which is, if you don't know it, it's absolutely magic. I've got it here as a PDF, but I need to talk to my technical advisor over there. Simon, after I've shown the PDF, I've just shown the PowerPoint, can I go to some other things on here without mucking everything up? Be honest.
Yes, maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay. Well, in that case, I will read you this from the Mass on the World. I would have read you more. But since I have neither bread nor wine nor altar, I will raise myself beyond these symbols, up to the pure majesty of the real itself. I, your priest, will make the whole earth my altar, and on it will offer you all the labours and sufferings of the world. So, if you find nothing else from Teilhard, please get yourself a copy of his Mass on the World, because it is absolutely magic. And this is where the expedition in 1929, where they found Peking Man. They since discovered Peking Man was actually a woman. But never mind. And the bust is on display in China's Chardin Museum. So they reconstructed from the skull, reconstructed the features. And apparently there are several geological museums in China still dedicated to Teilhard and his findings. And he was invited in 1931 to become an official geologist for a Citroën-sponsored expedition across the full expanse of Asia, which would have been for him exciting. But just the breadth of it is huge. And paleontological expeditions required large amounts of equipment and tons of samples, mules, donkeys, camels. So the more they found, and they found incredible skeletons, rhinoceroses, horses, they packed up on the back of these poor beasties and sent them back to Beijing, back to wherever was appropriate. That's his cousin Marguerite. And she was his first cousin, his playmate, his confidant. He wrote her letters. They're the letters that he wrote, the letters of the soldier priest. And Lucille Swan was an American sculptress Teilhard met in Peking. She was his friend and his soulmate. They were both in love with each other. She would have quite liked him to have left the church. He said no, his vows of chastity, etc., were what was important to him. They loved each other dearly, but it was very platonic love, because Teilhard would not go against his vows, his sacred vows. And if you look, there's another one in a minute. She sculpted this bust of Teilhard. She was a very talented sculptress. And she was chosen to sculpt the head of Peking Man. And they discovered that Peking Man was a woman. If you look at this picture, you can see the two of them, can't you? You can just see the caring, seeing the love. For him, women were very important. He said that when he encountered women, it was as if his whole perspective expanded. And for him, across his whole life, he would share his ideas with women. He would bounce his ideas off women. He would find the companionship of women very, very important. But at the same time, his priestly vows were essential to him, which must have been quite frustrating for some of those women, because you can just see the look on Lucille Swan's face there. And that was his family chateau. They were quite wealthy, as you can tell. So he retreated. Before he went off to the States, he retreated back to the family chateau. Again, because he'd been forbidden to publish. They couldn't forbid him to write because they couldn't stop him. But he could be forbidden to publish. And that's from his room at Les Moulins. View today, you can see the what we would say is low-lying hills. And that's Jean Mortier, who saved his works, his secretary. His gravestone, he was buried in the Jesuit novitiate. Now, he talks about Omega Point, and the Omega Point is already existing, it's personal, but it's transcendent as well, autonomous and irreversible. So we are in Omega Point, but we are working towards it at the same time. And it's like a spiral working towards Omega Point. And I'm not doing it justice, but we could spend several hours just discussing that. So, and there's another diagram of it in which matter is working up to the Omega Point. That point of amalgamation with God, but also God being aware and humans being aware in matter. And this diagram is, again, something that you probably need to study rather than me talk about it now. It's something that really needs probably a group working through. But from pre-life to consciousness to convergence to a greater expansion of awareness. So all of those images are courtesy of the Teilhard de Chardin project. Now, if I leave, Simon, I'll just leave this up because I'll talk if that's okay. That's the end of the PowerPoint.
We'll cancel out of that, and I'll put you back on Zoom with everyone. So we'll go stop sharing screen. Stop share. Yep.
Stop share. Yep.
Okay.
Close that.
No. Green. The green button.
Green button. Okay.
And we'll make view. Go to gallery. Or that big square one. All those squares.
That one.
That next one over. That one.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Now, where was I? I've lost it. Having done all this and done a lot more research, just a few days ago, I found this amazing movie that was produced in 2023, and it's called Shushu. It's on here and I can't get out of it, can I? Teilhard. Oh. Can I just minimize this or not? Or am I going to?
What do you want to do?
I just in my file, I've got the title of the movie.
Okay.
No, let's leave it. Without checking, it's called Teilhard. I think it's scientific visionary or visionary scientist. And it's under the auspices of the American Teilhard Society. I've actually downloaded it, but it's an hour and 57 minutes long. But it is well worth looking at because it has a lot of pictures, it has a lot of moving images, it has interviews with some of the experts on Teilhard. There's a woman called Ursula King who's written books about Teilhard. They're really worth reading. So if you, well, what we could do at some stage is watch that movie here, but probably not all in one go because an hour and 57 is too much, or people could access it themselves. But I managed to access it and download it. But if you go to the American Teilhard Society, you can get it. So I can't go to the Mass on the World because I didn't print out a copy. But what I can do is there is an American spiritual teacher called Jean Houston, which you may or may not have heard of. Now, Jean Houston met Teilhard when she was a child. She says, one day, this is in New York, on 84th Street and Park Avenue, I ran into an old man and knocked the wind out of him. This was serious. I was a great big overgrown girl, and he was a rather frail gentleman in his 70s. But he laughed as I helped him to his feet and asked me in French accented speech, are you planning to run like that for the rest of your life? Yes, sir, I replied, thinking of my unhappiness. It sure looks that way. Well, bon voyage, he said. Bon voyage, I answered and sped on my way. About a week later, I was walking down Park Avenue with my fox terrier, Champ, and again I met the old gentleman. Ah, he greeted me, my friend the runner, and with a fox terrier. I knew one like that many years ago in France. Where are you going? Well, sir, I replied, I'm taking Champ to Central Park. I go there most afternoons to think about things. I will go with you sometimes, he informed me. I will take my constitutional. And thereafter, for about a year and a half, the old gentleman and I would meet and walk together as often as several times a week in Central Park. He had a long French name, but he asked me to call him by the first part of it, which as far as I could make out was Mr. Teilhard. The walks were magical and full of delight. Mr. Teilhard seemed to have absolutely no self-consciousness, and he was always being carried away by wonder and astonishment over the simplest things. He was constantly and literally falling into love. Remember one time he suddenly fell to his knees in Central Park, his long Gallic nose raking the ground, and exclaimed to me, Jean, look at the caterpillar. Ah! I joined him on the ground to see what had evoked such profound response. How beautiful it is, he remarked, this little green being with its wonderful, funny little feet, exquisite, little furry body, little green feet on the road to metamorphosis. He then regarded me with interest. Jean, can you feel yourself to be a caterpillar? Oh, yes, I replied, with the baleful knowing of a gangly, pimply-faced teenager. Then think of your own metamorphosis, he suggested. What will you be when you become a butterfly? A papillon, eh? What is the butterfly of Jean? What a great question for a 14-year-old girl. Question for puberty rites, initiations into adulthood, and other new ways of being. His comic, tragic face nodded helpfully until I could answer, I don't really know anymore, Mr. Teilhard. Yes, you do. It's inside you, like the butterfly is inside of the caterpillar. He then used a word that I heard for the first time, a word that became essential to my later work. What is the enteleki of Jean? A great word, a Greek word, enteleki. It means the dynamic purpose that's coded in you. It is the enteleki of this acorn on the ground to be an oak tree. It's the enteleki of that baby over there to be a grown-up human being. It's the enteleki of the caterpillar to undergo metamorphosis and become a butterfly. So what is the butterfly, the ontology of Chardin? You know, you really do. Well, and I'm just going to skip a bit here. Mr. Teilhard seemed pleased. Ah, Chardin, look back at the clouds. God's calligraphy in the sky. All that transforming, moving, changing, dissolving, becoming. Chardin, become a cloud and become all the forms that ever were. And there was a time Mr. Teilhard and I leaned into the strong wind that suddenly whipped through Central Park. He exhorted me, Chardin, sniff the wind. I sniffed him and taken great snorts of wind. The same wind might have once been sniffed by Jesus Christ. Sniff by Alexander the Great. Sniff by Napoleon. Sniff by Voltaire. Sniff by Marie Antoinette. There seemed to be a lot of French people in that wind. Now sniff this next gust of wind and very deeply, for it contains Jeanne d'Arc. Sniff the wind once sniffed by Jeanne d'Arc, filled with the winds of history. So she went on with these conversations, and there's several more pages, but I'm going to leave them there. But one day, one Tuesday, she went to meet him in the park and he didn't come, and she never saw him again. But years later, she received a copy of The Phenomenon of Man. And on the back cover was Mr. Teilhard. So it's a very special story. And at that stage, I think we might just leave it. So thank you. And enjoy, don't explore amazing person.
Thank you, Susan. I'll just stop the recording.
Yep.